You promise not to fall asleep? You can't snore. Okay, no snoring. Anyway, thank you all for coming. My name is Mike Murphy. I'm innkeeper emeritus around here, and thank you all. Thank you very much.
I want to know what the emeritus business is. There's no emeritus for you.
No emeritus? Oh. Well, I'm not a functional innkeeper either, whatever I am. Anyway, you've read the title, I presume. Flying saucers. How many of you came here for the flying saucers? Really, seriously. And how many for the psychics? And how many for the psilocybin? How many for all three? Well, okay. Well, we're off to a good start. We're going to cover all that ground, and I want to introduce Jeff Kripal, whose brainstorm this is. This is the second meeting we've had on this subject, which he will describe. And I just want to hold up his book about Esalen. Have you guys read this book? You really ought to read it. It's in paperback. It used to cost, what, about $80? It's down to $35. Anyway, it's the most comprehensive, by far, history of Esalen, and it's also a window into the world, the larger world we inhabit. Jeff and I have been working together now, what, 10 or 11 years? And when I read his first book called His Child, it was love at first read, and we've been doing business ever since, and I hope for the rest of my life. Jeff.
Thanks. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. This, as Mike said, is our second meeting. We met last May, and we, of course, are meeting again this May. The basic idea of these meetings is popular culture and the paranormal. That was really the original idea. And the question was, how do people's real paranormal experiences get translated into film and TV and comic books? And why is it that we can't take these things seriously in our elite public culture, but we all celebrate them when we go to the movies or read a piece of fiction? This year we expanded the canvas a bit. Now there's a kind of triangle. There's the paranormal, there's popular culture, and there's science. And the theme of the week, really, we've sort of framed it up as taboo and transmission. Again, why aren't these things talked about? And how are they transmitted in popular culture? We've got folks here from the comic book industry. We've got the biographer of Philip K. Dick. We had Jacques Vallée, a world-famous ufologist, who was with us Monday and Tuesday. We heard terrifying stories about UFOs in Brazil, which we won't get into, because they're too scary and long. We have parapsychologists. We have a physicist who overlooked the remote viewing program that our government was involved in for over 22 years, which basically involved using psychics to spy on the Soviet Union. So the theme of the week is the paranormal's real, and we want to talk about how to talk about it. And popular culture seems at this moment to be the place where it's really talked about. Tonight we have Chris Knowles with us. This is Chris standing over there. Say hi to Chris. Chris is an artist for Marvel Comics. I invited Chris last year to this event because of a book he wrote called Our Gods Wear Spandex. It's a lovely book, still is a lovely book, about the mythical roots of superhero comics. And it's in the bookstore, and I strongly recommend you reading that, particularly if you're interested in superheroes. This year, Chris did a wonderful presentation on Jack Kirby, one of the Marvel artists who really created most of the superheroes they're making movies out of now with a man named Stan Lee. And tonight I asked Chris to present his most recent book called The Complete X-Files. Hold it up, please. There it is. And so he's going to talk to us about the X-Files and how the paranormal has been embedded or seeded in our culture through this particular television series. So give a warm hand again, please, to Chris Miller.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Michael. I want to start off with a few questions. How many people here have seen a UFO? Okay. How many people here have had what they consider a psychic experience? How many people here have had what they call a psychedelic experience? How many people here are having a psychedelic experience right now? Fantastic, fantastic. I love it. Okay, I want to talk to you guys about this television show, which was actually sort of a religious liturgy with goddess worship and mythology and alien identity and psychedelic experience all woven into it in very subtle and clever and subversive ways. Okay, bear with us, bear with us. Really, the X-Files is what Chris Carter called the search for God.
Danny, do we want those lights down?
Yeah, we can do anything, sure.
Chris, is that okay? Put the lights off?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, great. That's way down. On the way.
Okay. We good? Okay, I'm going to just keep talking while they're doing that. Chris Carter was a staff writer for Disney and Fox. He grew up in Bellflower, California. Lifelong surfer. Very interesting guy with a lot of interesting pursuits. When he left the X-Files, he wrote some very interesting articles on string theory and things like that. Let's talk about the X-Files itself. You probably are familiar with the basic premise. It's about two FBI agents that investigate the paranormal. One is a believer, one is a skeptic. The show ran for 9 seasons, starting in 1993 and ended in 2002, and there have been 2 feature films. Okay, this is very important because this show had a mythology embedded into it, and we're going to talk about what mythology actually is. It's not fairy tales. It's not about, people use the term mythology to talk about some sort of deception, things like that. Mythology is actually something much deeper and richer. The show within the series alternated between what were called standalone episodes, which were self-contained stories, and mythology. The mythology dealt with ongoing alien colonization. The myth arc in the show inspired shows that some of you guys probably watch, like Lost, Battlestar Galactica, Heroes, Fringe, other shows like that. Slide. Okay, now this is the basic premise. We have these government bureaucrats who cut a secret deal with the aliens after the crash at Roswell. They call this syndicate. They are helping the alien colonization in exchange for immunity. The aliens use this black oil, which is a sentient virus, which infects a host and incubates an alien within it. Some of you guys might know this guy. This is C.G. Spender, aka the Smoking Man, aka Cancer Man. This is actually based on a real-life figure, which was E. Howard Hunt, who was one of the Nixon gang, who also, in his spare time, when he wasn't overthrowing governments and assassinating political leaders, was writing really bad pulp fiction under a pseudonym. Okay, now this is where we get into the interesting stuff. There is an overt and covert use of mythological symbolism that dates back to our mystery traditions, to our mythological traditions, and particularly the goddess traditions. As I say here, it combines UFO lore, what I like to call polite euphemism, visionary experience in ancient archetypes. Okay, let's get into the first myth here. How many of you are familiar with the myth of Demeter and Persephone? Okay, great. Very interesting thing is that Chris Carter, what he was doing with these two characters is that he was reversing traditional gender stereotypes. Mulder acted on instinct, and Scully acted on hard science. He wanted to reverse these traditional stereotypes we have about male and female roles. So Mulder in this storyline is Demeter, and his sister Samantha, which constitutes the mythology for the first 7 seasons of the show, is his Persephone. Next slide. Okay, now this is a very interesting thing about the X-Files, is that they would use symbolic or tribute casting. David Duchovny, right here, played a cross-dressing DEA agent in Twin Peaks, which was a huge influence on the X-Files. Okay, for those of you not familiar with the myth of Demeter and Persephone, we're going to just hit some of the bullet points here. Persephone is the daughter of the goddess Demeter, who is the goddess of agriculture, of the earth. Her daughter is out collecting flowers, and Hades, the lord of the underworld, spies her and falls in love with her. He grabs her and he brings her down to the underworld in his chariot. Demeter searches for her and leaves the earth barren. This is, a lot of anthropologists believe that what this is describing is the winter months when the earth is not fertile. Demeter then enlists Hermes, otherwise known as Mercury, otherwise known as Thoth, to help her search for her daughter. And this is the basis for what are known the Eleusinian mysteries, which we're going to get to later, which were very, very interesting. We're going to talk about the mystery religions because they're really the basis for Western culture, and the basis for the mysteries themselves is got a very interesting source. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is the first time they incorporated the Persephone storyline in a standalone storyline. Scully becomes Demeter. She gets her sister is dead. She gets a phone call from her sister telling her that a woman needs help. Her sister is Hecate in this storyline. The sister was involved in the occult. She was involved in magic and things like that. She finds this girl who's the daughter of this woman who's committed suicide. And she believes this girl is the daughter of her dead sister. And the girl is also the subject of these alien hybrid experiments. Okay, again, what we see in the X-Files is symbol upon symbol buried in layers. And what the show is doing here is that the episode is entitled Christmas Carol. And we have these flashback sequences where Scully is reviewing her life. But she later finds out through DNA testing that this is actually her daughter. This is her Persephone. Scully had been abducted in an earlier storyline, and her ova were removed for alien experimentation, and this was the result of this. By setting the show at Christmas, what they are doing is that they're drawing these dying, resurrecting mythologies that we see in the ancient mysteries all the way up to Christianity. So this is a very subversive thing they're doing. They're sort of upending conventional attitudes about the roots of our religions. Okay, now this is very interesting. We looked at Hades and his chariot. This is Dr. Calderon. He's responsible for Emily's condition by withholding treatment. Emily is reliant on this alien transfusion to keep her alive. The symbols that we're looking at here is Calderon is of course a play on cauldron. Hades' cauldron, the cauldron of abundance. We see the chariot here in the form of this car. The injections that Emily is receiving is a symbol of the pomegranate seeds that Persephone eats in the underworld that keeps her in the underworld for 6 months. Okay, now this is really interesting as well. Aiding in her search is Detective Kresge of the San Diego Police Department. How many people are familiar with Kmart? Kmart was originally SS Kresge and Company. Mart, market, and merchandise have the same root as Mercury, who is also Hermes. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing aliens and conspiracy playing out these very ancient mythologies. Okay, here we go. This is it right here. This is Demeter. This is Hermes, aka Mercury, bringing Persephone out of the underworld. There's a very interesting storyline in here, again, later on, that has to deal with the alien roots of humanity. And what we're seeing in science is what is called panspermia. And panspermia advocates believe that the Ceres asteroid is the source of life on Earth, that life on Earth was seeded by an asteroid. Okay. This is a vignette from the second part of the story. This is Demeter. She's wandering the barren earth, as Demeter did in the mythology. Demeter was so stricken by her loss of her daughter that she let the earth die. She let the earth turn to sand. And the gods, appealed to her to let the earth grow again, but she said, only if I can get my daughter back, only if I can get my daughter back from the underworld. So we see this very interesting, archaic clothing. She's walking through the dark, she's walking through the sand. This is what, covert symbolism. This is a representation of Demeter. This is a representation of the earth goddess. This is a representation of the earth in winter, when the earth is barren, particularly in some of these northern climes where the sun wouldn't even come out in the winter months. And here we see all very symbolic. This is Emily, this is her daughter, being placed into these medical apparatus. This is her descent into the underworld. This is her literal descent into the underworld. We see this very interesting. This is Scully as Demeter. She's looking down at her daughter who's dying, who's being subjected to these tests. Very strong, direct symbolism. And here, what we see here is that this is the end. Emily dies because she no longer has this alien injections that keep her alive. She's dying in the wintertime. Her alien hybrid corpse turns to sand. This is something the X-Files does a lot. They're playing on your subconscious mind. They're using symbolism. They're using triggers. You might not consciously recognize that you're being given this information, that you're being given these myths, but your subconscious mind is registering this. And what we see here is a double exposure. We see Scully's face, the goddess, the mother goddess, being superimposed on the stained glass window of the Virgin Mary. And there are a lot of scholars who believe that some of the Christian mythologies spring from this idea of the descent into the underworld, the Virgin, the Mother, and this is what they're doing here. They're showing you this directly. Emily later appears in an episode about the Nephilim. How many people here know what the Nephilim are? Nephilim, okay, this is exactly what the show is about. The Nephilim were angels who fell from heaven and mated with the sons of men, the daughters of men, I'm sorry. And created, that too, they were really crazy. Created what were called the sons of God in the Bible. And what the X-Files does is that they're reinterpreting that in an alien, science fiction context. Just gonna drink. You can advance the slide. Okay, but back to the underworld. This is the descent into the underworld. This is the story, this is the feature film. It was called Fight the Future. The myth they're drawing on here is Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus is the god of music, god of sad songs. Mulder sings a sad song in a bar to give you that symbolism. Eurydice is bitten by a snake and she's dragged down to the underworld. Scully here is playing that role. She's bitten by a bee infected with the black oil. Again, we see the chariot, the symbolism of Hades, the descent into the underworld. You know, this is all very deliberate attempt to use ancient mythology to inform this mythology. And here we go here. This is Mulder as Orpheus descending into the underworld. You can see this here. But the underworld is actually a buried flying saucer. He rescues Scully, brings Scully out. How many people have seen this movie, Fight the Future? Okay, thanks. Rescues Scully, rescues the goddess from the underworld. And then we see the ship fly out, and Orpheus was told not to look back, and we see Mulder looking back here. All right, now this is what I want to talk to you guys about. Most of this has been preamble. I want to talk to you guys about the link between hallucinogens, visionary experience, human origins. This storyline was called Biogenesis, the Sixth Extinction. What happens here is that there are alien artifacts found in Africa with Navajo writing. You know, this is anomalous. A professor from the Ivory Coast disappears. It's very important, the Ivory Coast. How many people know the meaning of this name here? Dr. Sandoz. Okay, Dr. Sandoz is the suspect in this murder. And the actual culprit is this man named Dr. Barnes, a skeptic secretly searching for these alien artifacts. And what they find here is that these alien artifacts have passages from the Bible, from Genesis, written on them. In the storyline, Mulder was infected with a black oil, so he has alien DNA within him. The radiation from these rubbings and from these artifacts activate his alien DNA. He's becoming a god in the context of this story. He's becoming alien. He's also becoming psychic. Now, the interesting thing about the show is that psychic ability is an indicator, it's an identifier of godhood, of alien identity. So he becomes stricken by this radiation. Give me a second here. I'm actually new at this, so I hope you guys just bear with me here a bit. But he realizes here that our genesis was alien. We are here because of them. They put us here. This is, we're getting into what's called ancient astronaut theory, intervention theory. A theory that aliens in prehistory had abducted proto-hominids, apes, chimpanzees, and genetically manipulated these apes so that it eventually would become human beings. Next one. Okay, so Scully travels to the Ivory Coast because Mulder has been stricken. She's trying to find a cure for his disease. What she finds here is this ship. And the ship, what it is that it's an eye in a triangle. Some of you might be familiar with that icon. The ship is covered with Navajo translations of ancient holy texts. But the ship also incarnates itself as a tribal shaman. It takes human form as a tribal shaman. Dr. Barnes, who we met in the previous episode, and an African professor helped translate these rubbings, and which are translations of the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran. There's information about human genetics and the human genome. How many people remember the show The Secrets of Isis, the Saturday morning show? Okay. This is what the X-Files does. It's covert symbolism, tribute casting. What we see here is that Scully is being identified as Isis through this visual conjunction here. Dr. Barnes was a lead character in The Secrets of Isis. There's also these visual tributes where we see Scully interpreting photographs from the ship. And this is from the credit sequence in The Secrets of Isis. Scully here is becoming a goddess. She's being exposed to alien radiation. And this is all symbolic because the radiation symbolizes this knowledge, this gnosis of our alien roots. Okay, and what else we saw here? That she's on a beach. And in the myth of Isis, when she's searching for her lost love, Osiris, she also lives on a beach. Okay, there's a third mythology tied in here. Mulder has been abducted by the Smoking Man because his alien DNA allows him immunity to the coming alien apocalypse. What this episode does, this is the third part of the episode, it references the movie Last Temptation of Christ. Mulder has these dreams, these visionary dreams, where he is tempted with a normal suburban life with Diana. Diana is another DNA name. We have Dana Scully and Diana Fowley, both referencing DNA. The Smoking Man is the Satan in this storyline. We also had the seduction by the Nephthys character when Mulder was stricken with the DNA. And this is, again, another parallel to the Osiris story. This storyline is really detailed, and it's very difficult to sort of impart these details because the devil is in the details, but I want to give you guys just sort of an overview of how they are tying into these ancient mythologies and making them consonant with science fiction ideas of alien intervention. And Mulder also has these visions of the future of his son. And we can see here this very obvious crucifixion symbolism here. We see the crown of thorns. But it's all being reinterpreted as alien. Okay. Another thing that's very important in the X-Files is the Anasazi Indians, Pueblo mythology. Chris Carter actually underwent the Navajo peyote ritual to prepare for some of these stories. This character here is named Albert Hosteen. He's a Navajo wise man. He's a telepath. He astral projects himself into the storyline here. But all these themes are tying into apocalypse. They're tying into this revelation of alien identity. And we're also seeing not only the Christ mythology, but we're also seeing this Isis and Osiris mythology playing out here. She plays the part of Mary Magdalene, and here she is Isis. She's raising Mulder from the dead, just as Isis raised Osiris from the dead. Okay, and now this is how the story ends. Mulder has been rescued by Scully/Isis, and he returns these visions. These are precognitive flashes of his future with his son, but it's also a symbolic rendering because they're building this giant spaceship. Now, this is directly out of Egyptian mythology. This is a very ancient depiction of Osiris, Horus, and Isis. Now look what they're traveling in. They're above the ground. Isis is following the stars. This is basically an ancient depiction of what we might call a spaceship. Not to say this is based on an actual alien spaceship, but this is a spaceship. They are in a disk. They are traveling across the stars, and they're flying above the ground. Next. All right. This whole storyline was preceded by an episode where Mulder and Scully are exposed to hallucinogenic spores of a giant underground mushroom. The episode was called Field Trip. What happens is that they're investigating an alien abduction, And they drive to the wilds of North Carolina, and here are the mushrooms. As soon as they run over these mushrooms, they release these spores, and they inhale these hallucinogenic compounds. This is a giant carnivorous underground mushroom. And I think you can kind of see the symbolism here. Now, what are the producers saying here? We have this storyline with the ancient mysteries, with UFOs, with alien intervention, but it all starts with this, with a trip. Next one. They experience these incredible hallucinations where they telepathically speak with aliens. Yes, they have these alien visitations, and telepathy is intimately linked to psychedelic experience. Now I want you to see here, this is a frame. How many people have seen the movie Altered States? Right. Look at these so-called skulls from the trip scene down in Mexico from Altered States. What do these look like to you? They look like him. Now, the very strange thing about this is that in the storyline, they're repeatedly escaping, but you're never quite sure if they actually did escape, and then you find out that they're back in the mushroom. So the question really has to be raised, is this whole storyline where they become gods, where they are exposed to this alien radiation, where they discover the mysteries of human origin, human genesis. Was this actually part of the trip? Did the trip actually end? This is done deliberately. This is the way the show operates. They never answer questions. You have to wonder for yourself. You have to figure these things out for yourself. But there's another interesting clue. I told you that the show took place on the Ivory Coast. The Ivory Coast is one of the only countries in Africa that has a sacred mushroom tradition. So this is being deliberately done. The story is being set in the Ivory Coast because they've done the research. They know that there is a tradition, there's a visionary tradition, sacred mushroom tradition on the country of the Ivory Coast. Again, this is another shot from Altered States. This woman is made of sand. The sand blows away. You saw this back in the episode where Scully becomes Persephone. The same exact motif is being used. Okay. Now this is what they're sourcing here. This is a book written by Gordon Wasson and Albert Hoffman. It's basically researching the origins of the mystery religions. And what scholars today believe the origin of the mystery religions was visionary experience, hallucinogenic experience. There was a sacred sacrament called the kykeon, which was made from barley. But scientists now believe that it contained LSA, which is lysergic acid amide, made from ergot. Terence McKenna believed that kykeon was made with Demeter muscaria. So what we're seeing here is that the basis of this mythology is in the ancient mythology, in the mystery traditions. But what is the basis of the ancient mystery traditions? It's hallucinogenic experience. It's visionary experience. These ancient cults used these sacraments to commune with the gods. Okay. Here they're returning to the Osiris mythology. This is the second abduction and murder of Osiris. He's lured by a gathering of abductees. Osiris was lured to a dinner party. He's abducted and dismembered just as Osiris was during the second abduction. We see these two characters. We see a new character named John Doggett. This is a reference to the dog-headed god Anubis, the god of the dead, who is actually the son of Osiris during his liaison with Nephthys, who is Isis' sister. So we have John Doggett. Skinner here is Thoth. They're assisting in the search. We also have a new character here who plays the new Nephthys, Monica Reyes. Again, the symbolism. Nephthys was the wife of Set. The Set in the X-Files is the smoking man. You see her with these cigarettes. This character also was based on Scully's sister, so she is meant to be the more magically oriented character in the X-Files. All right, here's some interesting symbolism here. This is taking part in this second abduction of Mulder. We have the Last Supper here. And John Doggett is being baptized. So we have John being baptized. The symbolism sort of, it passes your attention until you really freeze these frames. And you can see this is almost set up like a Renaissance painting. Here we have the lone gunman. But what they're doing, again, is that they're combining Christianity, Egyptian mystery religion, all in the setting of ufology, of science fiction, but it's all leading to human identity. The human identity itself is alien. This is a through line in the entire series. Okay, now here we are. This is Anubis finding the sarcophagus of Osiris with Isis. It's the same exact situation here. Here's Anubis. The sarcophagus, the dead body of Mulder is beneath this tree. And here's Isis Scully. Here we go here. Just as Osiris' body is found in a tree, here's Mulder. Just as Thoth and Anubis restored Osiris' body, Skinner and Doggett dig up Mulder's casket because he's not actually dead. He's just been infected with an alien virus. So the parallels are so extensive and so detailed that there's just absolutely no way they can be coincidence. Now, why is somebody who wrote a book on the X-Files and interviewed all these people and talked to these people, making this kind of conjecture? Because they don't talk about this stuff. They will not answer direct questions about these things. I was not actually allowed to talk about the mythology when I was working on this book. They don't mind, speculation. They don't mind, if you make these kind of conjectures, but they will not answer these questions because they want these things open to interpretation. And here's the in-jokes. This is Mulder, this is tying back to Osiris' resurrection. It's not going to be Curse of the Mummy. We saw this before in Mulder's first abduction. Your mummy will still love you. Isis restored Osiris to life with her magic. We see Scully restoring Mulder to life with her medicine. And here's William. This is Horus. The first time we see William is here on the beach. He's crowned with the sun. There we see Horus crowned with the sun. We see him identified with the sun here. Of course, Horus was the Egyptian sun god. You see this kind of symbolism through juxtaposition throughout the entire show. Here we see the birth of Horus in the mythology, in the Egyptian mythology. Isis and Nephthys flee to a marsh to deliver Horus. Scully and Reyes flee to these hot springs to deliver William. Isis was fleeing Set. Scully is fleeing a super soldier. The gods attend the birth of Horus, and the super soldiers attend the birth of William. So, very detailed, very deliberate conjunctions of symbolism. They're replaying these ancient myths. This really ties into why I think the show was so popular for so long, because it resonated on that mythic level. These stories have been around for thousands of years, not because they're entertaining or they still hold true today with our technology and our science. These things hit very important triggers in our subconscious mind. Again, we see this mixing Christianity, Egyptian, and UFO. To find the birth of William, they follow a star. After William is born, we see the three wise men delivering gifts. Okay. When Horus was young, he was living in the marsh of Buddha with his mother and the gods. Set. Whoa. All right. Go on. So again, William is Horus. William psychically, telepathically controls this spaceship. This rogue FBI agent tries to kill William in his bed, just as Set tried to kill Horus in his crib. These parallels are just, very extensive, run throughout the entire series. Okay, now here we see this is a UFO cult that has abducted William. He's telekinetically controlling this spaceship. And again, after this sort of alien apocalypse happens, we see this double exposure. We see the remnants of this fiery death and superimposed over a Christian altar. What they are doing is showing that our religions throughout history are all based in the same themes, and that these alien themes of these new religions, of UFO cults, are simply replaying these same themes. Next one. Okay. Let's get into the cosmology of the X-Files. What is the Bible? Preaching, prophecy, misread. The implication being, within the storyline, let's just say that to be safe, is that the Bible is based on experience of the ancients with these entities, with these aliens. The mythology offers both overt and covert signals that the gods and angels of the Bible are alien, and that the world's religions are all based on alien contact. Some of you might be familiar with this theory. There are authors like Eric von Daniken and Zechariah Sitchin that have promoted this. It's actually it's a theory that's becoming promulgated by people like David Icke in a different context. But this is something that is gaining traction, that these stories are actually stories of contact with these entities. And again, throughout the series, it's all been written, but the word is extraterrestrial. We had the producer of the show saying that all episodes of mythology because mankind is part alien. We see these signals, covert, Scully and Reyes kneeling. These are the rubbings from this godship. They're kneeling before them like they're holy texts. And then they say the overt signals are the very word of God on the surface of an alien spacecraft, which means that everything man believes in is in question. Now, the same theme entered the popular culture in a big way in Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. This is classic intervention theory. Human evolution is jump-started by alien technology. The monolith is a technological instrument that transforms these chimpanzees into mankind. It alters their DNA, their neurology, and the next scene we see is mankind in orbit around the Earth. But we have these same themes again. We have the Stargate, the trip sequence as it's known. So this alien contact is intimately tied to hallucinatory experience. We see Bowman entering the Stargate and the revelation that mankind is a space seed, the star child. We also see some of the same themes of conspiracy that we see in the X-Files, that the character of Haywood Floyd is actually a pretty sinister character. He's there to cover up the evidence of the monolith, that we found this ancient astronaut artifact on the moon, that mankind is not alone. Okay, this was the last movie. This did not directly deal with UFOs, but we see all these symbolic, Mulder's light as a flying saucer. We see the I want to believe spaceship in his office. But what they are doing here is they're doing two things. Metaphorically, replaying the myth arc. This is about women being abducted, which ties into Demeter and Persephone again. The aliens are actually illegal aliens. They're human-based aliens. We have a Frankenstein allegory. But the key to this story is about psychic powers. That's the central theme of this story, is that psychic powers are tied to our alien identity. And here's this priest, Father Joe. His eyes are bleeding when he has these visions, these visionary experiences. This all takes place during the winter, which ties again to the barren earth of Demeter and Persephone. We see these new archetypes, the same archetypes we've seen throughout the series. We have Nephthys and Anubis. They're searching for body parts in the snow. So they're combining the mythology of Demeter and Persephone with Isis and Osiris. And here, this is very clear. This is about you trying to save your sister. This is about Demeter and Persephone. We see the abducted girl searching for the lost girl in the barren landscape. The abductee submerged in the cauldron. We see a cauldron again, just like we saw in that earlier storyline. And she's kept from escaping by a two-headed dog. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Cerberus from the ancient mythology, the three-headed dog of Hades. Dog symbolism is very key to the story. The dog star Sirius is identified with Isis. Dogs search for body parts. This is showing us that what we're seeing here again is Isis's search for Osiris. And Skinner shows up again playing the role of Thoth. We're seeing the Sirius symbolism rising in sort of what I call the meme stream again. The star Sirius was always venerated. It signaled the rising of the Nile, which started the Egyptian New Year. It brought the silt that allowed them to grow this incredible agriculture in this desert land. Again, the same symbolism. This is Osiris, Mulder's Osiris emerging from his casket. Thoth reassembled the body parts of Osiris. We see Skinner, who is our Thoth, wrapping Mulder up, just as Thoth wrapped the body parts of Mulder in the gauze and the bandage. Here's Mulder, playing the part of Demeter. He's feminized here. He's reversing these archetypes. He's at the gates of hell here, and then he encounters the two-headed dog. This is straight from classical mythology. This is the gates of hell. This is Cerberus. Okay. This is the Hades character. When we see this character, he's below the water. This is showing that he's part of the underworld. He's underneath the surface. He's identified with this very menacing truck with this plow here. This is Hades' chariot. Okay, in both the Isis and Demeter mythologies, when they're searching for their lost loves or their lost loved ones, there's a very interesting commonality in these stories where they both nurse this sick boy, and they're trying to nurse to burn away his mortality so these boys will become immortal. This happened in both the mysteries of Isis and the mysteries of Demeter. We see this here in the X-Files. Scully is now a doctor, and she's caring for the sick boy. Again, these covert clues. Don't put the boy through hell. This is symbolizing the burning away of the mortality that we saw with both these characters, Dictys and Demophon. And again, the double entendre, you're not Sirius. Sirius, S-I-I, the star Sirius, which is identified with Isis. Okay, this is the final scene. And Chris Carter called these characters the three graces. He said this in the director's commentary. Scully is about to operate on this boy with this very dangerous experimental treatment for his brain disease. And we see the three graces. Look at here. Here they are here in this Renaissance painting. This is Botticelli. We see the abduction. We see the Earth Mother. This is Aphrodite. This is Hermes, Mercury. That's Eros up there. Okay, I'm kind of going through this stuff a little quicker than I'd like because I don't want to bore you guys too much. And I don't know how many of you are actually familiar with the series, but I wanted to just sort of establish this as a baseline. I wanted to show you how this series is tying in mythology with UFOs and alien identity, and also with psychedelic experience. Now, hopefully I can make this all work with my grand finale. The grand finale is not actually about the X-Files. The grand finale is a discovery I made when I've been researching a book on the ancient mysteries. Can we go to the next? The Methodic Liturgy from the Paris Codex. This is a very ancient text. The Mithraism mysteries, as some of you might know, were the direct competitor to Christianity in ancient Rome. Very similar. We had a god born on the 25th of December. He died, he rose again, he was born to a virgin. Some of you might be familiar with this story. There's a film going around the internet called Zeitgeist, which another version of the same dying, rising god, Horus, who we saw earlier in the X-Files. So these themes are very ancient. So where did they come from? Where does this theme come from? Anthropologists will tell you that this is about agriculture. This is about the growing seasons. This is about the earth. This is about these people's connection to the earth. The dying god is the death of the sun, the rising of the sun on the solstice. That's all true. But there's something else going on. Because these stories don't just deal with these natural rhythms. They don't just deal with agriculture or nature. There's something else going on. A lot of people are talking about the ancient astronaut theory, that there were the Anunnaki, the Nephilim, gods upon the earth. We see evidence of this in the Bible. We see evidence of this in the Sumerian texts. That all may be true. But there is something else going on. This is an actual liturgy to the Methodic mysteries. There's very little written evidence of this belief system. What did these people believe? We have a lot of artwork, we have a lot of sculpture, we have anecdotal evidence and histories. What did the Mithraisms actually believe? What was the purpose? These men were extremely dedicated. These men followed a very rigorous ascetic lifestyle. They were sworn to secrecy. Why were they so dedicated to this god? What were they doing that was so important? What was this liturgy? They would have these incredible rituals where they would slay an ox and cover themselves in his blood. They would have these, all across Europe, they had these underground caverns. They would gather by torchlight and have these rituals. What did these people believe? What was so important to them? Well, let's read excerpts from their liturgy. It is necessary for you, O daughter, to take the juices of herbs and spices, fire given by God to my mixture of mixtures in me, sanctified through holy consecrations. What the first part of this liturgy is basically describing is that hallucinogenic compound. These people are mixing in a mixture of herbs and spices. I don't know what the original translation is, but plant compounds that bring to them these incredible visions. This is the food of God. This sacrament brings them into direct contact with God. Next frame, please. After they take this mixture, you will see yourself being lifted up and ascending to the heights so that you seem to be in midair. We see this all the time in UFO stories. What possible context could these people have for being ascended into midair? You will hear nothing either of man or of any other living thing, but rather you will see all immortal things. Whatever this experience is with it being taken up into the air, this is no longer ordinary experience. This is completely visionary experience. Next frame. The course of the visible gods will appear through the disk of God, the origin of the ministering wind, for you will see hanging from the sun's disk like a pipe. You will see the outflow of this object towards the regions westward, boundless as an east wind. The disk of God. This object is a disk. It has exhaust. There's an exhaust, the ministering wind hanging. There's a beam of light that looks like a pipe hanging from this. This was written 1700 years ago. What is the context for this? Next week. And when the disc is open, you will see the fireless circle and the fiery doors shut tight. Then open your eyes and you will see the doors open and the world of the gods which is within the doors. This disc has doors. The doors open up. Inside these doors are the world of the gods. What is this object? What context do they have for a disc that opens up and takes people into the heavens, takes people into the world of the gods? Within this liturgy, they describe seeing the heavens, seeing the firmament, looking down upon the earth, seeing the world in its order. I don't know about you, but I don't think these guys were watching Close Encounters or E.T. This is written 1700 years ago. The language in this is incredibly clear. It's incredibly explicit. They're entering a disc and meeting the gods. It's all about light. It's all about fire. And this all begins with a hallucinatory experience. Now, Terence McKenna talked a lot about this. Terence McKenna believes that ayahuasca, certain other psychedelic compounds, would bring you into direct contact with alien entities. It turns out that was not a unique belief. I talked to Jacques Vallée about this liturgy. He had never heard of it. I had never heard of it. I'd never heard it talked about in this context. But it turns out that the most powerful religion before Christianity of the ancient world was a UFO cult, essentially. And it was also for lack of a better word, a mushroom cult. So, and this is really breathtaking to me. Because we saw in the X-Files the same patterns repeating throughout the show. When I spoke to Chris Carter, he said that he doesn't know where his stories came from. He said the stories seemed to write themselves. It was almost like he was channeling these stories. This is not a unique phenomenon in this kind of experience. There is a common experience that we see at least 1700 years old that is combining a psychedelic experience and an alien experience and a religious experience. What is the roots of this? What is the source of this? Scholars outside of books like The Road to Elysius don't want to discuss this. It's really a forbidden topic. Aliens are a forbidden topic. But I really do believe that there is something real here. There is something so consistent and anomalous as the Methodic Liturgy that cannot be explained through cross-contamination, that cannot be explained by cultural contamination. I think very much that there is a revelation here that is still waiting to be seen. It might have a lot to do with why the powers that be want to keep all of this stuff under wraps. I think in a lot of ways, the mythology is still so powerful that things like Harry Potter and Star Wars, Star Trek, all these things are playing to the same ancient themes because there is something embedded into our DNA that remembers this contact, that remembers these experiences. It sounds, like pretty wild stuff. And most of this evidence, as of now, is anecdotal. It might always be anecdotal. But I think we really need to be looking in these directions. Because mankind is sort of a lost child. We're sort of like, we don't belong anywhere, it seems. We seem to treat the earth the way a colonizing force treats a third world country. We're maladapted to this environment. We need to look more seriously at what our origins may be. Our origins may not be of this earth. Maybe there is no missing link. Maybe there is a component in our DNA that is alien. And that maybe our memories of this are encoded into our DNA, and that these visionary experiences, not only psychedelic or hallucinatory experiences, but visionary experiences, tap into this lost knowledge of our origins, of our roots. And I really thank you guys for sitting through this. I've never done this before. This has been really kind of nerve-wracking for me, and there was a lot of material to go through, and maybe one day I can put this all in a book if I'm not afraid of Chris Carter suing me for the rest of my life. But I really do believe this. I really believe that humanity is at a crisis point right now, and I think a lot of it has to do with not really being quite sure who we are. The X-Files was really about searching for those answers, and I think that these are questions that we need to start asking ourselves more seriously. Thank you.
Chris, are you willing to answer some questions?
Absolutely.
Well, why don't you, we have two mics, Danny, or no? We'll just talk. You just hold the mic and
Does anybody have any questions?
Have you read Dr. Strassman's book?
No.
Spirit Molecule?
I'm sorry, what's it called?
Dr. Rick Strassman's book, DMT, The Spirit Molecules?
No, but I'm familiar with his theories, and I think there's probably a lot to that. I think that DMT, as a natural hallucinogen, located in neurology, I think that that's something that we really need to explore.
His participants in his study experienced the alien ability.
They experience these alien contexts. I believe it. I totally believe it. Thank you. That's a great question.
Have you ever heard of the mushroom cults in the ancient Mayan civilizations?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And do you know, I know some about them, but do you know like if they had the same theories or similar theories, or?
Well, what they had, ancient astronaut theorists have looked at the Mesoamerican cultures quite deeply, quite seriously. We have a lot of interesting texts from Mesoamerica that talk about the gods that descend from the sky and teach men to build and to grow. I think there's a lot to that.
Yeah.
I've two completely unrelated questions. The first is, one slide identified a female character, and it noted that she was, her character was changed under network pressure. I wondered if you could say something about that.
Yeah, I love that character. Monica Reyes she was gay in her original incarnation, and she was written as such. In as much as you see this in the X-Files, nothing is ever spelled out clearly in the X-Files. Everything you have to figure out. But they, the network forced them to change his character, and they actually talked about this publicly because she was gay, and the network, she was supposed to replace Gillian Anderson in the next season, and the network didn't want a gay lead character on their flagship drama show.
And the other question is, in your interviews with the show's writers, what was your sense of the degree to which they were really tapped into some of this literature versus, they were just drawing on symbols and characters and archetypes that are part of our collective past?
That's a great question, because you really have to do a lot of detective work with this stuff. They will not directly address these themes. Sort of obliquely, Frank Spotman said that, all the shows, whether they're about monsters or psychics or whatever, we're all mythology because we're all part alien. But they're very hard to pin down, which I don't blame them for. Of course, this could all be my own hallucination. They will never answer any direct questions about what exactly they were tapping into.
Well, just to throw this in the question, just to throw out a few more references. Houston Smith wrote a book not so long ago called Cleansing the Doors of Perception, where he talks about or speculates that hallucinogenic drugs may have been the source of religion
Mm-hmm.
on this planet. And of course, that refers to Aldous Huxley's The Doors of Perception, where he talks about other ways, not only mescaline, but other hallucinogenic experiences, like Gregorian chant as a way of controlling and
Absolutely,
changing
yeah.
the CO2 level in our blood.
It's very interesting that you bring up Houston Smith, because Houston Smith was the inspiration for the last X-Files.
Was he really?
Yeah, Chris Carter said that he attended a lecture by Houston Smith, I think, maybe at UC Davis, and he was just so inspired by it that, you know, that was used as a springboard for the last X-Files film.
Yeah.
So that's a good
And
question.
one more thing, the book of Ezekiel talks about
Absolutely,
angels with
the
spinning
wheels within wheels,
wings.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
They actually quote Ezekiel in one of these mythology episodes.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, this is something the X-Files does all the time. They will quote a Bible passage, but they will misname it. They quoted Ezekiel repeatedly through this episode that had to deal with this Horus mythology. But they said that it was from Ephesians and not from Ezekiel.
That's way off. I was wondering, because it's corporate media, could it be just mis and disinformation, especially even just boldly naming the things that could actually be, and then steering people, you know, like,
Chris Carter is 100%.
you know, Disney.
No, he's for real. He's definitely for real. There's no doubt. All those guys were very much for real. They were not part of any kind of overarching agenda. They had to fight tooth and nail all the time to get these shows on the air. So no, I don't think this is part of some disinformation campaign at all. No, I wouldn't have done the book. I wouldn't be doing this work. You know, I wouldn't have stood here sweating before 30 or 40 people if I thought that. Any other questions?
Why do you think that Mulder's character was so obsessed with pornography?
That actually comes, that's an inside joke. There was an early producer on the show, well, it was a production team, a couple guys named Morgan and Wong, who always had porn lying around the office, and there were some complaints to the network about this, so that was written into the story. But you know, Mulder is a loner, you know, he spent, you know, I'm really interested in like hidden psychosexual dynamics, and I always found it really interesting that it took, you know, these 7 years to hook up, you know. So that's a whole other topic of conversation. Any other questions?
Yeah. Seems like you've done a lot of reading on Terence McKenna, and didn't he believe that it was like the hominids like crossing the savannas of Africa, eating the mushrooms that like caused the brainstem to like evolve into Homo sapien?
Yeah, well,
I know I stated that very
yeah, Graham Hancock picked up on that theme in Supernatural as well.
Mm-hmm.
When you sort of look back at some of the mysteries of the ancient world, I mean, I think that's a great and very interesting theory, but you know, there's a lot of evidence that there was something else going on. You know, there are interesting, like anomalous megalithic structures. There are holes drilled into rock that you need a diamond drill for. There are giant megalithic structures moved that you would need a 300-foot crane to do today. You know, so. It's an interesting question. I mean, I'm not quite sure the mechanics of it. It's all theory, but yeah. I mean, I think Terence McKenna's work in that area is really interesting.
Seems to indicate that we need to keep evolving.
Yeah, we need to start evolving. I think we've been deep evolving pretty badly the past 20 or 30 years.
How much do you think that's orchestrated? It seems like it's pretty purposeful to try to withhold.
Probably all of it. Dumbing down by the media, dumbing down by the educational system, dumbing down religion. I've been having some conversations with people here. I grew up a conservative Methodist, and you know, we were actually taught the Bible. And, you know, confirmation class, you had to sit there and you know, explain. I remember in my 5th grade Sunday school class, we actually would have debates. We'd have to read, you know, a passage of the Bible and then debate its meaning. And none of that happens anymore. Bible study is basically somebody telling you what the passage means. You know, so we've dumbed down religion, dumbed down media, dumbed down educational system. Yeah, I mean, George Carlin has some interesting thoughts on that.
Did you talk to the actors a lot?
Matt did most of the interviews, actually.
I mean, did they have a sense about you know, what their work like meant, you know, out there. And
I don't know, but we have somebody who went to school with David Duchovny here. Paul?
What do you want to know?
Do you have any interesting David Duchovny anecdotes?
He was a nice guy. He was dating a nasty woman. I was very happy when they split up. That was the.
That's it. Was this at Yale?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions?
I was wondering, as the season, particularly with these X-Files going on television, as the seasons got to be further on, did the popularity and the ratings increase as time went on? Or what's your sense about that?
Well, I mean, I've seen the numbers. It's like any show. The show peaked at the 5th season with the release of the movie. I think, you know, they have 25 million people a week watching, which is pretty amazing for a show that's subversive. You know, so to have these kind of ideas sent into 25 million living rooms really kind of blows my mind, because all the influences that these guys were drawing on was just so completely obscure. I mean, what could possibly be more obscure than what we're talking about now? What could possibly be more subversive? But they nailed the zeitgeist. They hit the zeitgeist. You know, the zeitgeist changed. The thing that really killed the show was 9/11. You know, after 9/11, nobody wanted to watch a show about government conspiracies. You know, they made George Bush an alien super soldier. You know? And that had to be changed as well. Yeah, you know, every show has an arc. It has sort of an upswing, and like I said, they peaked in the 98 to 99 season, and then they just sort of, I mean, it was always a popular show. Always had good numbers. But, you know, the influence, I think, is really going to be the telling thing of its value. You know, we've seen a lot of UFO sightings. During this past week, we had Jacques Vallée, the top UFO researcher in the world, you know, telling us some of his data, you know, his research. And that thing sort of comes and goes. The interesting thing about UFOs is that, you know, people lose interest in it because what the hell can you do about it? You know, they're up there in the sky flying around. They don't really seem to bother us all that much. You know, there's nothing we can really do about it. So, like the zeitgeist of the early 90s was really encapsulated into that show. And then when the zeitgeist changes, you know, the ratings go down. But the show was always successful.
But I thought it was so interesting that in my part of the country, the show never appeared during, quote, prime time.
What was your part of the country?
Well, in Oklahoma, which I'm not speaking for Oklahoma in general, but like the show would come on Sunday nights at 11 o'clock at night, and everybody had to go to work the next morning. And it never appeared during prime time.
Well, Oklahoma's an extremely conservative state.
Correct.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Well, I just thought that would certainly have something to do with the ratings in general.
No, like I said, the show was always successful. It was a big money maker because it tied into that key demographic. They always had good advertising revenue. You know.
And the blue shirts for the men certainly brought something in merchandising.
I'm sorry?
Well, and the blue shirts that so many of the men started to wear after the show became popular.
Oh, the blue dress shirts?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, I'm a little confused. Are you saying that these psychedelic experiences are allowing people to have visions of like our story of our origin with aliens, or that they're having actual interactions with...
Well, I can't say that it's our actual origin. I mean, this is all theory, this is all conjecture. I think that psychedelic experience helps us bypass these filters we have in our consciousness. You know, don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating for psychedelics. I don't use them myself anymore. Yeah, not necessarily advocating. I think we have a filter in our brain that allows us to survive. You know, basically, it allows us to get through. You know, it's part of a evolutionary adaptation. I think that we have. I really believe this. I think we have knowledge of human history in our DNA. You know, I think that is part of our DNA. This is something that scientists are looking into, that memory is encoded in our DNA. And how far back this goes, I don't know. But when we see things like this 1700-year-old liturgy with no context for flying craft, describing that, where is that coming from? What are they describing? I think there's something just within us that we need to tap into.
What about locks on our DNA put there by the Creator, creating entities, and that the dormant DNA, which is what, 95% or something like that?
Well, they junk DNA,
Yeah.
branch DNA. It's,
Shadow
I'd love to give you guys all 9 seasons of the X-Files. You could watch them over the course of the year, and then we could come together next year and do this again. Because they did a lot about branch DNA, a lot about junk DNA. There was one character who was actually manifesting his alien identity because what was called the God module, there was that switch that was turned on. That was a really great storyline. It was the missing link. Yeah, that switch that all of us have had turned off has been turned on in this character. But the interesting thing to me about all of these storylines is that we've been dealing, we have Ed May here as the top psychic researcher in the world. We also have Dean Radin. These guys are real scientists doing work on psychic phenomena. And the X-Files, the hallmark of alien identity or of supernatural identity was psychic power. That's what separated the wheat from the chaff. That psychic ability was what was part of our evolutionary future. Which I believe, by the way.
Maybe one more question. It's almost 9:30. Unless somebody's got a really burning question here.
Nobody? Not one more question?
There's a first 2.
There's 3.
2. Well, let's do 2 questions. You first. You put your hand up first.
Can you tell me about the author of Chariots of the Gods?
Oh, I'd love to. I love that. Eric von Däniken. Eric von Däniken is one of these guys that sort of pops up, and you're never quite sure if he's P.T. Barnum or Albert Einstein. He was a Swiss hotelier who was raised a devout Catholic and started reading the Bible and was watching science fiction film and sort of thought they were describing the same thing. He wrote Chariots of the Gods, which came out the same year as 2001: A Space Odyssey, coincidentally exploring these same themes. 40 million copies of that book sold. 2 films made from that book. People sort of scoff at his theories nowadays. He's a little bit of a shog, and he's a little bit of a huckster. He's a showman, but he's done a lot of really interesting research. I don't know if he's the best person to go for that kind of information, but he has a lot of energy, and he's sort of a tireless advocate of putting these questions out there. Really that's what it's about. It's about questions, not necessarily answers.
Yes. Do you believe that show, The X-Files, has made a difference, or do you think it's going to be forgotten? If things are being dumbed down, how long are people going to remember The X-Files?
That's a great question. Well, certainly there are a lot of shows following its lead. There's one show on TV now called Fringe that's directly inspired by the X-Files. It all depends on how intent people are in questioning authority, because that's really what the show is about. It's about questioning authority. It's a very hard question to answer. I think what we'll probably see is that we'll probably see an X-Files Next Generation with new producers and new actors, just like they did with Star Trek and shows like that. So, let me get back to you on that one. I can't really answer that question right now. I hope that we're not so dumbed down that, we can't enjoy shows like this. But there are shows like Battlestar Galactica, which are incredibly politically subversive, that give me hope. So I think there is hope, and I think what we've been talking about in this conference is how you can use fantasy, science fiction to sort of make an end run over the gatekeepers of these questions. And that's one of the things that makes me optimistic about the future.
Chris, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.